Hello everyone, I'm Ryan from 2 Car Pros, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to replace the spark plugs in a 2002 V6 Toyota Highlander. This is a fairly difficult repair as far as spark plug removal and replacement goes. This is something I would definitely advise to watch a video like this one first before you get started. Now, with this video, I have made another video about cleaning the throttle body housing, which you have to take off in order to do this repair, so you're gonna go watch that video up here. Actually, it's up here in the card and link down below in the description, because if I upload the same footage twice, YouTube gets mad with me. So go watch that video to the part where you remove the throttle body housing, and if you're doing this repair, you might as well give the throttle body housing a nice cleaning, so that video is gonna benefit you as well. Then you're gonna come back, watch the rest of this video, where we actually do the spark plug repair, and then go back to the other video and watch how to put the throttle body housing back together. I know it's a little bit convoluted, but again, if I upload the same clips twice, YouTube gets cross with me, which is understandable. You don't want the same content twice. Now, the other thing I will say is, if you're watching this video because you're getting the repair done, here is an important tip for you. Make sure they show you all 6 plugs when you get them replaced, because on the vehicle I did, the front 3 plugs have been replaced, but the back 3 plugs, the hard ones, were stock. So the front 3, I believe, were NGK. Actually, I think the back 3 were NGK, and the front 3 were Bosch or something. They didn't match, which means somebody at some point did the front 3 and not the back 3, and maybe they paid for all 6. So that is something you need to check for as a consumer. Make sure you get them to show you all 6 plugs. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is remove this plastic cover plate here. You need a size 5 Allen, and you need to remove them. I'm actually just going to let them kind of sit in the housing here, and they'll come out when I remove the plastic housing. Like that, but it still won't come off, so rotating this Toyota emblem a little bit, their fingers underneath it, and lift that up, and then we can remove the housing as a whole. Okay, so after we get the cover off, you can see that the first 3 cylinders are very, very easy to get to, but like a lot of things in life and in automotive, if one half is really easy to get to, the other half is going to be really difficult. So we're going to do the easy ones first. And what we're going to do is push down on the safety here for the ignition coil and walk the connector back. Sometimes they're a little hard to push down, so you can grab an implement. There we go. Push down like that and come off. Just like that, and these 3 ignition coil bolts are 10 millimeters. There you go. Before we go any further, we're gonna grab some compressed air. You could probably just use a rag too, but I'm lazy, so we're gonna use compressed air. And we're just gonna blow the top of the valve cover here, just to make sure when we remove the spark plugs, no debris falls down into the engine. There we go, it's much cleaner. And then we can remove our ignition coils. And sometimes the ignition coils come off, but they leave this little seal here. Go ahead and reach in and grab that and put it back onto your ignition coil, because you wouldn't want to lose that, because that's what helps keep the spark plug well nice and clean. I see he wants to leave one behind again. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is grab our 5/8 spark plug socket, and you do need a spark plug socket with a good rubber O-ring up there. Mine is Blue Point. I recommend buying a quality spark plug socket to make your life easier. And we're going to grab a 6-inch extension, and we're going to place it on top of the spark plug. And when you're placing it down, don't just assume it's on. Really feel it out and make sure that the spark plug socket is flush on the old plug. And then we're going to use a ratchet here, and make sure you use a hand ratchet and you don't use an air ratchet or any kind of power tool. You want to use just manual strength to remove these.
and they're not in super tight. So remember that when you're putting it back in. If you don't have a torque wrench, I will give you the torque specification in just a moment. It'll eventually become so easy you can do it by your hand. And once you're sure the threads have cleared, you can pull that out just like that, and we can remove the spark plugs. And we can do that again for these two over here. And if you're really terrified of anything falling down into your engine while you're working on it, you can stuff some paper towels in the spark plug wells just to keep anything out of there. Especially if you're going to store it for a while or any length of time where you're not present. Because it would really stink if you got something stuck down there. Okay, so I've ran into an interesting situation where my spark plug socket let go of the spark plug, but it is no longer in the thread, so it's kind of just sitting in the spark plug well. So that's when we grab our magnet on a stick. And that makes that extraction nice and easy. This tool is really nice to have. And you can buy them at Harbor Freight for like $6. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is take a look at our new spark plugs. Got these NGK Laser Iridium Premium spark plugs. Link down below in the description. And we're going to take them out of the package. And see that it has this nice sheath on there because these are pre-gapped plugs. You might want to double check that the gap is what it says right here on screen, and if you need a tutorial on how to gap a spark plug, up here in the card is a great place to look. So we're going to make sure that our spark plugs are identical, they're the same size, they're the same shape. They have a little bit different number on them. Instead of a T, instead of an A, it has a T on the new one, but they're the same thread length, they're the same pitch, they're the same gap, they're the same everything except this one's newer, so that's good. We need that. Before we install the spark plug here, we're going to put some anti-seize on the threads here. That way when we take them out in the future, they don't lock into the head. We can set that aside. And now we're going to turn our attention to the ignition coil here. And there is no dielectric grease in there. And if there was, you can just take this lower part off. And you can clean in there real well and stuff. So if there is old dielectric grease, do try to clean that off and have that be as nice as possible. And reinstall the boot here. And then I'm going to put some dielectric grease down in there. And don't worry too much about like pushing it down in there, because when you install the coil, it's going to be smushed down on here anyway, so it's really not that big a deal. So do that for all three spark plugs and ignition coils, and we can reinstall them. So the next thing we're going to do is load up our spark plug here in our spark plug socket, just like that. Make sure it's not going to fall out on us, which it's not, and we can drop her down into the spark plug well, making sure that we don't jam the sides or touch the strap. And we're going to put this in by hand so we can feel if it is cross-threading or not. And I can tell you right now it's not. It's totally fine. Because if the spark plug's not spinning in here real easy, finger tight, you know, there's a good chance it's cross-threaded, so you need to back it out and retry, because obviously you don't want to cross-thread a spark plug. That'd be bad. The next thing we're going to do is grab our torque wrench here. If you don't have a torque wrench, that's okay. You can just do medium tight, because the torque specification is 14 foot-pounds, so it's not very tight. There we go, and we can do the other two. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is replace our ignition coil with the loaded dielectric grease on top here. Make sure that fits down nice and snug. Make the bolt line up there. We can replace that bolt, and the torque specification is 71 inch-pounds. I don't really have anything that goes that low, so I'm just going to use my best judgment. So it's a small 10mm bolt. Don't put a ton of pressure on it. And all it's doing is holding the coil to the valve cover here. It's not really holding anything super vital. I mean, it would probably even work if you took the bolt out and just left it there. That is just there so the ignition coil doesn't fall out while you're driving. And then we can plug it back in. Just like that, super easy, and we can do that same thing for the other two. plug those in just like that. They just push straight on. There you go. So we've done the easy 3, now we need to get to the hard 3. And as you may have noticed, this V6 design is actually rocked backward toward the firewall. So the plugs are even a little bit harder to get to than they would be if the engine was flat. It's not, it's pitched backward. You might be able to get back there and try to get the ignition coils and spark plugs. I don't know, maybe if you're like Gumby. But I am not Gumby, I'm a regular person, so we got to take the intake manifold off, and I've already taken the throttle body housing and its extension off due to a different repair I will be showing in a different video. You could probably leave that on and just unplug everything and then remove it, but it is really easy to just remove it. I have a great video on that you can check out here on how to remove all of this, so I will do that video first because it's kind of supplementary to this video, so you might want to go check that out. It's a little hard to get apart, so but we're at this stage now, and we got to take the intake manifold off. Now I can remove this vacuum line off this plenum here. Just pulls straight off. Just be careful, you don't want to shred the line. The next thing we're going to do, because it's in our way, but we don't actually have to remove it out of the vehicle, I'm going to leave everything connected, is this rail here. It looks like a vacuum control rail. Just looks like a ton of vacuum lines going to it, and it's held on with 2 10mm nuts on the end of both of my pointer fingers here. But it looks like you're going to need a deep well or a wrench. Maybe you can get a wrench on that. I don't know. Deep well is going to be your friend here. So now we can kind of move this out of the way. We can even just flip it over just like that. I was wrong, there are 14mm nuts right here. So close though. The next thing we're going to do is grab some compressed air and blow around where the intake manifold attaches to the top of the engine. This is to prevent any gunk getting in there and ruining your day. And the next thing we're going to do is grab a size 8 Allen and remove these 2 Allen headed bolts. And you're really going to need a socket for this. You can't get away with using an Allen wrench. They're on pretty tight. And they're decent sized bolts too. These aren't just little ones. And we can remove all of those and set those aside. Okay, so here's where we're at, team. There is basically nothing holding the intake manifold into the car except for, if you see back here, there's like this random black bar that's totally not needed. There's a bolt that holds something in back here, that holds in the intake manifold with, I believe, a 12mm bolt, and there's a little berm around this metal piece here, so there's absolutely no way to get just a regular wrench on it. It has to be a socket. And I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to get that out of there. If I'm leveling with you guys, that's going to be a challenge. This is why I refuse to talk to automotive engineers at parties. Right here, this is why. Holy cow. And for added difficulty, this tube here basically forces you to open your hand every time you bring it back. So, added difficulty. This is going to take me a while, so once I'm done, I'll let you know how I did it. It's going to involve many curse words. I can already feel it. Okay, so on this mount here, whatever the heck you want to call it, it was actually a 14mm bolt. I thought it was 12. I thought it was 12 because everything behind the engine so far, or behind the intake manifold, has been 12. It's not. It's 14 for some God unknown reason. That is just so ridiculous. But with that bolt out of our way, we can finally remove the intake manifold. Oh, and there was a ground here that was on the intake backside of the intake manifold, and that was a 10mm. And then, like I said, this is the really troublesome 14mm that took a thumb finger ratchet and a lot of patience. There's the bane of my existence for the past half hour. It took me forever to do this, so that is probably the most forget you bolt I've ever seen in my life. I have no idea why it's there. The intake manifold is more than supported by the bolts it came with. And we're also going to take our gasket here for the intake manifold off and examine it. If it is in bad shape, replace it, but this one's fine, so we're just going to clean it and put it back in. So at this point for the intake holes, we're going to grab a shop towel or something to cover them because we don't want any debris or, heaven forbid, a bolt or a nut to fall down in there while we are working on the plugs. Okay, with the intake manifold out of our way, we need to unplug the ignition coils here. I'm just going to trip the safety with my nice little pick here. And we can remove those 10mm bolts. Alright. Remember to twist the ignition coils before we remove them, and if that washer doesn't come, or not washer, but that little O-ring doesn't come along with it, we gotta go fetch it. Really? There it is. Those all the way out. Alright, got my spark plug loaded up, just like the other side. Second verse, same as the first. Make sure that's nice and not cross-threaded, which it's not. It's going in very nicely. Very good. So just like the other ones, we're just going to do this until it's too tight for finger tight, and then we're going to grab our torque wrench. And again, if you don't have a torque wrench, you can either rent one or just use your best judgment for medium tight, because it's not on super tight. There you go. Alright, last one. Oops. There we go. Nice and torqued. Okay, now we can replace our 3 ignition coils here. Making sure those O-rings are along with it, as you wouldn't want to misplace those. They're vital for keeping junk and debris out of the spark plug well. Make sure those are on nice and snug. Just like this. And before I bolt this last one along here, I'm going to plug it in because it was a little tricky before. So we can plug that in before we bolt the ignition coil down. You can actually do that for all of them if you want to. That order doesn't really matter so much. And now we can replace the bolts. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to clean the mating surface for the intake manifold here. We want that surface as clean as possible. As you can see, it's very dirty, very oily. There's even a little bit more gasket material on here. But it is coming clean. I mean, look at the area already clean compared to where I haven't. It's much, much better. The cleaner a surface is, the better the gasket's going to work. And you want your gaskets working, trust me. There we go. That looks pretty good. And we're also going to clean this mating surface as well. Cool. Now this is ready to go back in the car. Alright, so a couple of things before we put the intake manifold back on here, or plenum, whatever you want to call it. Right here is where the crankcase pressure tube attaches. That is what this is right here. That goes into there. And there's a ground. Be very sure to replace this ground. And this ground goes on the other side of the plenum. So this ground there actually attaches on the back side for some unholy reason. So that's what this bolt here is for. So a good idea is before you replace this is to reattach that ground to this so you can have it up like that while you're working on it. So we're not bolting in the intake manifold just yet. We are going to attach that ground. There we go. We're just going to leave that finger tight for now and we'll tighten it up later. While you're working though, don't gouge the surface between the intake manifold and the plenum. You know, basically the engine and the piece we've been working on. You don't want to gouge that, so let's go ahead and go grab that gasket. Okay, we're going to make sure we line this gasket up properly. And I cleaned it off camera pretty well. I didn't think anybody wanted to see me clean something even more than I already had. It doesn't really seem to matter which way this way goes on, but it matters this way, so it needs to be... I'm going to put it on like this, because that's how it was when I took it off. And I'm really hoping the factory knew how to put it on, right? That's the idea. Okay, so with that in place, we're ready to replace the plenum onto the intake. So those studs there are going to keep everything nice and lined up for us gasket-wise while we lower the plenum here back on. Intake manifold. That. Very good. Everything's seated down properly. We can go get those Allen bolts. We can replace these nuts here. Oh, I'm so good, dude. I'm gonna tighten these 14mm nuts here. I'm not gonna do them all at the same time, or all at once. I'm gonna try to do them as evenly as possible. And you want these on pretty tight. Here. And then on the back where that ground was, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that some more because loose grounds are no good, no good. And it's not that hard to get to. There we go. And we can replace that 14mm bolt that holds the plenum here to basically nothing, just to make things difficult for you. One could even argue that that is completely and totally over-engineered and not necessary at all. So if you didn't put it back, I respect that decision. I understand it fully. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and put that back. Yeah, it's back. All right, we did it. Who knew it was gonna be much easier to put in than take out? Who knew? All right, we need to put that ground back on back there that I didn't tighten earlier. Remember? Of course you remember. You guys are smart. Because we need to put this ground on, and grounds are absolutely essential. You have to put them back on or things can get weird, really quick. And we can finally tighten that 12mm up. There we go. Okay, we can flip this vacuum line rail, I'm gonna call it, back in its home and get its nuts. All right, we're gonna put on the 10mm nuts here. One on the left, and there is one on the right. Now these are little 10 mils, so don't put them on insanely tight. Just, you know, tighten up. If you want me to make up a torque spec for you, because you just have no clue, 13 foot-pounds. Sure, why not? I'm going to do this one as well. To my highly accurate 13 foot-pounds. I don't know if that's the real torque spec or not. I'm just guessing, because it's not holding on anything crazy. It's just, you don't want this going anywhere, and tight enough is fine. Okay, there's actually two grounds for this particular one, and it looks like this ground goes on first, so we have to take off that ground and place the skinny ground on first, and then the bigger ground. Like that. Perfect. And now we can replace the nut. I'm sorry if you can't see anything. My apologies. It's in a very tight spot, but there are two grounds there, and they both need to be grounded. There we go.
So that's how to replace all 6 spark plugs on your Toyota Highlander. This is a fairly advanced repair that not everybody's going to be able to do with their level of patience, but it's not so bad if you're not under a time constraint. Then you can kind of sit there and take your time and figure out how to get that really pain in the neck 14mm bolt out. I don't know why that's so difficult. That is what I would call over-engineered. But other than that, it's not too bad. You just have to remember where all the vacuum lines plug in. So taking pictures or watching the other video is a great help on that. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell down below. And if you could like this video, it helps me out a whole ton. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.